The main character, Iris, wakes up at home, takes a folding knife, then gets in her car and heads to the forest, leaving her phone charging. She arrives at a makeshift memorial and looks again at a photograph of her son. It turns out that Matteo died during a family hiking trip, and she and her husband couldn't react in time. Unable to cope with the guilt and profound loss, Iris approaches the edge of a cliff, contemplating jumping off. The pain of her loss has become so unbearable that she can no longer even cry. Suddenly, her thoughts are interrupted by a stranger. The man introduces himself as Richard and starts a casual conversation, seemingly trying to help her change her mind. He tells her about his own tragedy and about the woman he lost. After that incident, Richard spent several months bedridden in a hospital and never thought he'd be able to walk or enjoy life again. After finishing his story, he leaves, giving Iris a chance to make the right choice. In the end, his plan works, and she decides that today is not the day she wants to die. Iris heads back to the car with Richard. She tries to get into the driver's seat but struggles because of the stranger's car blocking her path. Richard grabs an umbrella and quickly approaches her. Iris senses danger and tells him not to worry, saying she can enter from the other side, but Richard doesn't listen. In a flash, he shocks her, ties her hands and feet, places her in the back seat, and drives off to an unknown destination. When she regains consciousness, she tries to call for help, but her smartwatch has no signal. Her only hope is to reach the folding knife in her back pocket, but for that, she needs to distract her abductor. She begins to talk to him, recalling his recent story about losing a loved one. Finally, Iris manages to free her hands and attacks Richard. Losing control of the car, the kidnapper crashes into a tree. Iris escapes from the car and frees her legs, only to discover that a paralyzing drug had been injected into her while she was unconscious. She realizes that in a few minutes, she will lose her fine motor skills, followed by her ability to feel her legs and hands, and shortly before full paralysis, she'll also lose her voice. The drug's effect won't last long, but it's enough for him to carry out his plan. The woman tries to run away from the psychopath and dashes into the forest. Stopping near some rocks, she sets a timer for 20 minutes. Soon her legs start giving out, and she only has a few minutes left before she won't be able to walk. Understanding she won't be able to escape, Iris hides under the roots of a tree, but when ants crawl into her nose, she can't hold back a scream. Richard notices her and immediately tries to grab her. However, by some miracle, Iris finds a river and floats downstream toward a tree, somehow managing to get out. Her breathing slows down and her voice fades away. Now she is fully paralyzed and can only blink. Lying in the grass, she notices someone mowing the lawn nearby. She fears he'll ignore her, but the stranger turns out to be an elderly man who tries to understand what happened to her. He asks questions, to which she responds by blinking, once for yes, twice for no. Wanting to help, the old man takes a cart and brings her to his home. At that moment, there's a knock on the door. It's Richard. The psychopath pretends that his wife has gone missing. However, the old man doesn't believe him and insists he leave immediately, as he saw Iris's reaction when she heard the knock. Realizing the stranger won't leave, the old man starts asking for details about his wife's disappearance and even begins to sympathize with him at some point, listening to Richard's supposed family issues. Then the old man shares his own story of family life and is about to reveal that he found a girl outside when he suddenly realizes that Richard has been lying. Richard listens closely to the phone he supposedly lost, and the homeowner urges him to leave, but Richard attacks the old man. The elderly man tries to call for help, but doesn't manage in time. Iris, hidden under the couch by the old man, witnesses everything but is powerless to do anything. Meanwhile, Richard grabs a knife and kills the old man, then heads to the shed to look for his escaped victim. Realizing she's not there, he decides to erase the evidence. He douses the old man's body with a flammable liquid, sets the house on fire, and leaves. Since his car is out of commission thanks to Iris, he decides to take the deceased man's pickup, but the vehicle unfortunately won't start. At this point, Iris begins to regain some feeling in her fingers. However, all she can manage is to open and close the blinds. But it's enough for Richard to figure out where she is. He returns to the house, moves the couch, and captures his victim again. The psychopath drives her to his cabin in the woods where he plans to spend the weekend with her. Iris, as it turns out, is far from his first victim, although killing the old man was a new experience for Richard. Soon after, Richard receives a call from his daughter. He has a family who, of course, knows nothing about his hobby. To make matters worse, his wife decided to disrupt his plans by bringing their daughter to visit him at his cabin. He tries to dissuade her, as they'd agreed he could come to the woods occasionally to become a better version of himself. However, his wife insists, and he has no choice but to agree, much to his annoyance. Now he not only has to finish things with Iris, but also hide all evidence, something he hadn't planned to do today. Suddenly, they run out of gas and stop at a gas station. Iris looks around, hoping to see someone who could help, but everyone is too busy to notice her. She only manages to unbuckle her seatbelt. A young boy notices her, but doesn't understand her signal. Soon, Richard returns to the car, damaged from the crash caused by Iris, and finds a tow rope in the old man's pickup. He tries to attach it to tow the vehicle to a safe location, but at that moment, a patrol car arrives. The officer decides to investigate what's going on and why Richard looks so strange. Richard begins lying, saying his wife is struggling with alcoholism after the death of their son. The police officers are about to leave, and everything would have gone smoothly if not for Iris. She attempts to make sounds, and the officer approaches to find out more. She whispers, "Help," but the officer doesn't have time to react as Richard attacks him, striking him on the head and dragging his body into the car. Fleeing the scene, Richard takes Iris to a lake, the final destination of their journey. He doesn't realize that Iris managed to steal a syringe filled with the paralyzing drug, so he's surprised when she stabs the needle into his leg, although she doesn't have the strength to inject the drug. Richard puts Iris in a boat and heads to the middle of the lake, where he's brought his other victims. Iris understands that her death is imminent, so she asks him to give her Mateo's toy boat, which she keeps in her back pocket. Richard falls for this ruse, and she manages to grab a knife. It isn't enough though, so she's forced to shoot Richard several times, causing him to fall into the water. Moments later, the boat begins to take on water. Iris hasn't fully recovered from the drug's effects, so her body is still partially paralyzed. She holds her breath and lets the boat sink to escape to the surface. Eventually, she reaches the shore, seeing people nearby who have no idea what has just transpired only a few meters away. A few minutes later, she finds a dying Richard. She doesn't finish him off, but simply thanks him for the lesson. Although she had to endure horrific trials because of him, Iris is grateful, as this situation has shown her just how much she truly wants to live.